Hello again, friends, and welcome into Gamecock Central Radio. It's Emerson Phillips joined by Scott Davis. Glad to have you along today, and it's game week for Gamecock football. South Carolina taking on Vanderbilt this Thursday night at 8 o'clock, and we're looking forward to the start of the Will Muschamp era here on Gamecock Central. Scott, I read your column this week, and you hooked me with the lead, the first sentence of the column, where you said you've been watching a lot of movies lately, Jack Nicholson movies specifically, and like you, I spend a lot of time, passing the dog days of summer by watching movies. A lot of Netflix, a lot of cable TV movies.
No question. You gotta find ways to keep your mind occupied while football's gone. One of the greatest things about football is that it's so scarce. There's just not a lot of it. You get 12 of these days out of 365, 16 of them if you're an NFL fan, as I am. But there just aren't many game days out there, not even many game weeks, in which you get yourself excited to talk about this stuff. So I was sitting at home last night watching the MTV Video Music Awards, as I'm sure most middle-aged males were doing last night. And it's probably about the time that Kanye West came on stage and announced that he is now a genius on par with Steve Jobs, Henry Ford, and Walt Disney, that I thought to myself, I'm looking forward to some football. I'm ready for helmets and cleats and pads. Let's get this thing going.
You've been following the Gamecocks for a long time. You live in Atlanta, and you cover the Gamecocks for Gamecock Central, sort of from a fan's perspective. And as I was reading your column this week, which is up now on GamecockCentral.com, the headline of the story is "Embrace the Weirdness." You hooked me with the first line, Scott, and then when I read you wrote that Jack Nicholson is the quintessential Gamecock. You really had me 100% bought in right then and there. I don't know any warm-blooded Americans that don't like Jack Nicholson. There may be some folks, maybe in Beijing or Moscow that don't care for him. I don't know any Americans that don't like Jack Nicholson.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And there have been plenty of weird actors out there over the years, but I was thinking there's just something uniquely likable about Nicholson, and it's because of his weirdness that we like him. We're not afraid of that. We just sort of say, hey, that's our guy Jack doing his thing. And so when I thought about the Gamecock fan base, as I often do, Emerson, it started reminding me a lot of our fans and how they just continue to carry themselves as though they belong, even though the reality is this program has, as I mentioned in the column, won a single conference championship in 125 years. We've been to one SEC title game in the last quarter of a century. Just lost a legendary head coach, but you know what? The sense I'm getting from every Gamecock fan I talk to is that they can't wait to get this football season rolling. They're ready to see people actually playing on the field rather than talking about it. And that is just something that I notice every year in August that never seems to die, and it's why I, have so much love and respect for this fan base.
Yeah, it might be a cliche at this point, Scott, but hope truly springs eternal, particularly for Gamecock fans, and you're exactly right. Carolina fans are ready to see these young quarterbacks that Carolina's got, new players in Brandon McElwain and Jake Bentley. Of course, we expect Perry Orth to get some action this year as well. We know Perry after the year he had last year, but a lot of new faces and some young talent on this team, and, of course, a brand-new coaching staff. So Gamecock fans might be weird, but it's time to give the weirdness a hug, embrace it, and give it a hug.
There's no question. I'm looking forward to just watching this coaching staff in action because, listen, the Steve Spurrier years were by far the greatest in South Carolina's football history. There's no one that would debate that. But unfortunately, over the last couple of seasons, including last year when Steve Spurrier decided to step aside during midseason, there was kind of a feeling a little bit, I think, amongst Gamecock fans of, that this had kind of turned into a victory lap of sorts for Spurrier. He's always going to be most associated with Florida, and rightly so. And by the way, shout out to Coach Spurrier on his new job as Florida's ambassador, which he recently accepted. But, there was a feeling that maybe the energy and passion level for being at South Carolina was not there for him, as well as maybe some members of the coaching staff. And that's one thing that fans have really embraced this new staff. They're an energetic group of guys. They really get after it on the recruiting trail, and that was another issue going back to the last few years of Coach Spurrier's tenure. So I think there's a lot of excitement just to see what the product's going to look like. I think, if I'm being honest, a 6-6 season would thrill me as a Gamecock fan after going 3-9 last year, losing to the Citadel, losing most of your coaching staff, and starting over with a new one. But I'm really sensing a lot of energy among fans, and I'm delighted by that.
Yeah, a big couple of weeks of recruiting for the Gamecocks have helped give the sense that this program is on the uptick. And, Scott, 6-6 would certainly be a pretty solid year, considering it would double the win total from a year ago, and it would give the Gamecocks a bowl trip in Will Muschamp's first year. But regardless of the record, Scott, it feels like the program does have some momentum and some energy right now, particularly with the program landing commitments from 4 straight 4-star recruits here in the last couple of weeks. And Muschamp's brought new energy to the program. He and his assistants have done that. There's no two ways about it.
He has, and he's assembled an excellent staff. It's an SEC-worthy staff. Most of these guys are guys who either played in the league or have coached in the league for quite some time. They have a long, resumes worth of experience of coaching in the SEC. And it just feels like a group that, particularly when it comes to recruiting, has a definite game plan, a strategy, a desire to kind of meet young people today where they live and in ways in which they want to communicate, whether it's social media, texting, all that kind of stuff. Some of these guys that are now giving South Carolina strong looks have said, hey, we really weren't hearing too much from those guys until the new coaching staff came along, and now we're extremely interested and intrigued by them. And so the recruiting momentum's great. Obviously, once the games kick off and we see what the product looks like, that's going to change some folks' perceptions. But I think that, as you said, we just need to take this year for what it is and try to make it something that's a building block for the future. And if that's going 6-6 and going to a minor bowl, like you say, after you go 3-9, that's a nice step up. As long as you guys aren't out there maybe making reservations for Atlanta this season, let's just give these guys a chance to settle in and see what we've got. But I'm excited to see it.
Gamecock Central Radio, Emerson Phillips with Scott Davis. We invite you to download the Gamecock Central phone app. It's available on Google Play and on the App Store. We're also available on popular services like iTunes and SoundCloud, or you can just visit radio.GamecockCentral.com. Scott, we're getting ready for South Carolina and Vandy on Thursday night, and a lot of questions about Gamecock football entering the new season with this new coaching staff and a lot of new faces on both sides of the football. But hope springs eternal. I was a little bit uncomfortable when I first read that it's weird to be a Gamecock fan because Gamecock fans have hope every year going into a new year. But the more I read your column this week on the site, the more I agreed with you.
Yeah, I think, like I said earlier, I think it's just something we need to embrace. We're a unique fan base, and so I think there may have been one or two people who took what I was saying just directly at face value, or like, hey, what is this guy calling me weird? What's he talking about? And what I meant that by was as a term of endearment. I think it's I want our fan base to be unique. I want us to be different. I don't want us to be just another college football fan base that you don't know anything about, that doesn't have a character of its own. And we definitely do. Anybody you talk to that follows college football, particularly SEC football, will tell you, hey, I know all about South Carolina Gamecock fans. I mean, those guys, they're relentless, and they're acting like, LSU and Georgia and Tennessee fans, even though they haven't had, a storied history and their trophy cases aren't overflowing with hardware. And, that's what makes us us, and I want us to preserve that. And so no matter what happens, win or lose-wise this season, I just hope the fans will continue to be passionate, continue to be engaged, because that's something that's unique and great about South Carolina.
Scott Davis with us weekly here on Gamecock Central Radio during football season, and his new column is out, Embrace the Weirdness. And accompanying Scott's article this week, his column is a 3-minute video of Jack Nicholson laughing, and I promise that'll give you a laugh as well. That was good stuff, Scott.
You can't help but laugh when you watch it. I actually tried to watch it without laughing, and I couldn't do it. And folks, if you haven't seen this yet, it is literally what it says it is. simply 3 minutes of Jack Nicholson laughing, and that's it. And it's a glorious 3 minutes, let me tell you. So I urge you to go on there and look at it, because it's going to put you in a good mood, and it's going to encourage you to go all out in embracing your weirdness and your uniqueness as a South Carolina fan as we get ready to kick this thing off.
Scott Davis brings us a fan's perspective each week here on Gamecock Central and Gamecock Central Radio. Scott, are you going to Nashville, or are you getting your popcorn ready to watch at home, or maybe a sports bar?
I'm not going to Nashville. Unfortunately, I was there for the last time we played Vanderbilt in a very interesting game in which we gave up a kickoff return for a touchdown and got ourselves behind pretty quickly, and it was looking somewhat grim until the Gamecocks in the second half really just kind of eased into a fairly simple SEC victory on the road. But these Vandy games are always interesting, even when we've been posting 11-2 seasons back to back to back. We always seem to have an interesting time with Vanderbilt. They beat us back to back 7 or 8 years ago. So you never know, and they're favored in this football game, by the way, in case anybody doesn't realize that. If you go to Las Vegas right now and bet on this game, the team that is favored to win is Vanderbilt.
Yep.
So that's a unique position for us to be in. But I'll be watching here from home and pulling for the Gamecocks and just looking forward to seeing all these new faces out there, both coaches and players.
Right, Vandy, a 3 or 3.5 point favorite depending on where you look. So the Gamecocks are underdogs headed to Nashville on Thursday night. That in itself seems weird, and we embrace the weirdness here on Gamecock Central Radio. Scott, thanks very much.
Absolutely. Thank you. Good to talk to you again.
All right, we'll do it again next week. He's Scott Davis, and I'm Emerson Phillips, and this is Gamecock Central Radio. Thanks for joining us, and have a great week.